CBS 13 News is on your side, live at 5.
How would Maine be a better state with Donald Trump as president?
In an exclusive one-on-one interview with the Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump explains to our own John Christie why he wants to lead the country.
The GOP frontrunner rallied supporters this afternoon. We do have team coverage as fans and detractors are vocal about the billionaire businessman's plans for America.
But first, CBS 13's John Christie is live with an exclusive one-on-one. And John, you spoke with him backstage after the event. What did he tell you?
Yeah, they're taking the stage down now, but after the rally, we had a few minutes with Donald Trump backstage to ask him whatever we wanted. He told us he loves Maine, we have a great governor, and some people just try too hard to be politically correct.
Donald Trump is a little bit like I am, but he says what needs to be said.
With a rousing endorsement for Maine Governor Paul LePage, Republican presidential candidate, businessman, and entertainer, Donald Trump takes the stage in Portland.
Maine is amazing. You know, Maine is one of the most beautiful places on earth. That's some piece of land. Can I buy some, please? Can I buy some?
In fact, Trump told me backstage with the debate tonight in Detroit, there's nowhere else he'd rather be.
Well, I love Maine. I know so many people up here, and I just thought it would be a good thing to do, and it was a little bit not in the same direction, but going out to Detroit, I figured I want to stop in Maine.
And with that, it's down to the issues. How would Maine be a better state with Donald Trump as president?
Well, I think, frankly, first of all, I think you have a really wonderful governor who really, really works hard. I know for a fact he works so hard. But we're going to have better immigration policies. We're going to have very strong borders.
And those borders, he says, will help keep drugs out of our state.
The drugs will no longer be pouring in because you have a big drug problem in Maine like you do in New Hampshire and everywhere else.
His visit to Portland just 2 days after a sweeping victory on Super Tuesday, 2 days before the Republican caucus, and just a little while after Mitt Romney called Trump a fraud and a con.
I backed Mitt Romney. I backed him. You can see how loyal he is.
How do you feel about Mitt Romney suggesting that your supporters are, in essence, suckers?
My supporters are the finest people that we have in this country. They're strong, they're smart. I win in every demographic.
He's the only candidate who said no to the establishment and no to the career politicians.
I was in the military, so I support the military, and Trump definitely supports the military.
And as you can see and hear, Trump supporters are pretty loyal. Some started lining up here around 7:30 this morning, more than 6 hours before this rally was set to start. And coming up at 5:30, I asked Donald Trump about something that's in his book. In his book, he talks about his time at New York Military Academy and says his main rule was simple: do it right or do it again. So at 5:30, I asked him what he would have done differently and what he would do again in this campaign. That's coming up. You'll hear from him answering that question at 5:30. For now, reporting live in Portland, John Christie, CBS 13 News.
All right, thank you, John.
Donald Trump's visit didn't come without demonstrations. While the Republican frontrunner was speaking inside to his supporters, outside, protesters lined Congress and high streets.
CBS 13's Brad Rogers spoke to Trump opponents and some supporters as well. And Brad, some noisy crowds there today on both sides.
Yeah, pretty noisy indeed. Of course, right now, nice and quiet here on Congress Square. But a few hours ago, there were more than 100 protesters here voicing their strong opposition to Donald Trump. They were singing, lying down on the street, and shouting as loud as they could.
Keep America great! Mainers won't hate dumb Trump!
Protesters out in full force for the Donald Trump campaign stop in Portland. Those who believe Trump is wrong for America make no bones about why they dislike him so much.
I think he's one of the most destructive elements to enter American politics in quite a while.
He's just shouting out words, and they're really making hatred rise in the U.S. Against people of color, against people that are sexually diverse.
Trump also has many passionate supporters in Maine, people who believe he is exactly who we need in the White House.
He speaks his mind. The people don't like that because he's telling the truth. He wants to fix what's wrong, and in this time, it's time for a change.
I think that Donald Trump really can make a difference and make America great again, obviously.
Not obvious to Trump opponents, though, who say they can't understand how anyone can believe Trump will help working-class Mainers.
I don't think he has our best interests at heart. I mean, I'm certainly not particularly wealthy myself, and I don't think he cares very much about whether or not that's true for me.
Well, no arrests today, and things did stay relatively calm. A few people, though, did have to be taken to the hospital by paramedics, though, for being out in the cold too long. That included an elderly man that we saw here as well. We are live in downtown Portland. Brad Rogers, CBS 13 News. Now, stick around. New at 5:30, we're going to tell you how show you exactly how Bernie Sanders supporters poked fun of Donald Trump, and also a Trump opponent throwing a bottle of water on a Trump supporter. Stick around for that.
Brad, thank you very much. We will stick around for that. After taking Texas, Oklahoma, and Alaska, Senator Ted Cruz is hoping to add Maine to that list on Saturday when Republicans caucus here. Cruz will be at Maine in Orono. His campaign says they're moving the event to a larger venue now. The rally was originally scheduled to be held at Hawk Auditorium. It will now be at the Collins Center due to demand for tickets. Supporters are lining up in front of the Cross Insurance Arena in Portland. He is scheduled to speak during a campaign stop in less than an hour from right now. CBS 13's Greg Lagerquist just arrived at downtown Portland. Greg, it does look like there's quite a crowd there tonight.
Absolutely, Adrian. In fact, these folks, some of them anyway, started lining up at 3:30 this afternoon, so more than 2 hours. You mentioned people lining up outside. Let's take a look outside here. I'll have Dave Dane, our photographer, show you the view outside. People have been lining up outside. You can see just how long this line is. The doors literally opened about 2 minutes ago at 6 o'clock. So these folks have just now started to come inside. We're actually right inside the lobby here at the Cross Insurance Arena. First thing they're doing is they're having people sign in. Obviously, they're handing out a lot of buttons, a lot of different things you expect to see at a campaign stop. Now, the interesting thing here, as Adrian mentioned, this is a pretty big crowd for a very nice summer night in July. They actually moved it to this location because of the expected crowds. Hundreds of people, if not in the low thousands, are here right now, from what we're able to tell. Of course, he had a huge rally in Wisconsin over the weekend, about 10,000 people there. The interesting thing here is Bernie Sanders, of course, isn't even technically a Democrat. He describes himself as a Democratic socialist. He's an independent senator from Vermont. In fact, he is already the longest-serving independent in U.S. Congress history. He's been serving Vermont for 24 years now, first elected to Congress back in 1990. Interesting fact as well, a lot of talk about whether or not he's too progressive, too liberal to be elected as the Democratic nominee. Obviously, these supporters believe that's not the case. Other talk about his age. He is 73 right now. He'll turn 74 this fall. If elected next year, we're still 16 months away from this presidential election, he'll be 75. That'll be the oldest person ever elected to be U.S. president. So we're going to be here. We're going to hear what he has to say. He's speaking to these hundreds, if not low thousands of people here tonight, trying to get his campaign going. And I do want to mention this as well. You mentioned he'll be speaking at 7 o'clock tonight. Already we've heard Hillary Clinton, obviously the other big Democratic nominee, the person in the race on the Democratic side, starting to change her message just a little bit. Over the weekend, she said, hey, I'll hold up my progressive credentials against anybody, obviously referencing Bernie Sanders. So this thing gets underway at 7 o'clock tonight. We'll be here. We'll bring you more details tonight at 10 o'clock and on CBS 13 at 11. Adrian, in the meantime, big crowd. We'll send it back to you.
Yeah, a long way until Election Day. All right, Greg, thank you. 2016 presidential candidate Rand Paul brings his message to Maine, pushing for a smaller government and attacking Donald Trump. As Fox 23's Jennifer Long shows us, the Libertarian candidate hopes his stop in Freeport can jumpstart his campaign.
Please put your hands together with me and welcome Senator Rand Paul.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul greeted 250 supporters at Linda Bean's in Freeport. The Libertarian talked smaller government and the wisdom of the Founding Fathers.
We need to be fighting to preserve our liberty. We need to be fighting to protect the Bill of Rights.
Before the rally, we spoke one-on-one with the GOP hopeful about Maine issues. Paul supports the new law that allows anyone to carry a handgun without a permit.
I'm for more freedom, and so if Maine decides you don't need to have one, that's absolutely something Maine can decide, and I support that.
He says the answer to Maine's heroin epidemic is treatment, not more arrests.
Currently, there's a limit on how many patients doctors can see who are addicts. I would allow doctors, nurse practitioners, and other people that get the training to see addicts, because part of the treatment for addiction is actually replacement.
There are more than a dozen Republicans running for the White House, and Paul is near the back of the pack. Tonight, he went after the front runner, Donald Trump, calling him a liberal.
I hope that people will finally come to their senses and understand that this is a celebrity with no real solutions for the country.
I think that he's about the only hope for liberty in this country.
We as a country have lost sight of the Constitution. Kids don't even learn about it in school anymore, and it's supposed to be the backbone of the country. He wants to bring that back, and I admire that.
Rand Paul is back on the road tomorrow. He's making 4 stops in the Granite State, starting with Freedom, New Hampshire in the morning. In Freeport, Jennifer Long, Fox 23 News at 10.
Don't interfere with other people being able to participate, okay?
Hillary Clinton with some words for a group of silent protesters in Portland tonight. The Democratic presidential candidate spoke to an overflowed crowd tonight at King Middle School in Portland. As Fox 23's Jennifer Long shows us, she took on everything from Maine's heroin problem to the GOP frontrunner Donald Trump.
Oh, hello, everybody. That is so great. Thank you.
More than 400 supporters welcomed the former Secretary of State to King Middle School. Clinton spent a majority of the time talking about jobs.
Obviously, we need to raise the minimum wage. It is not possible to support a family on full-time work on the minimum wage. We need to make sure we have equal pay for equal work because women have to be equal participants in the economy.
8 Bowdoin College students were in the crowd asking Clinton to take a stance on the Keystone XL pipeline. Clinton immediately dismissed them.
Meanwhile, Governor LePage is throwing his support behind New Jersey Governor Christie for president. Christie announced he's running for the Republican nomination on Tuesday, and today he visited Portland. As you saw there, CBS 13's Lexi O'Connor was at Becky's Diner as he kicked off his campaign.
Becky's Diner is always busy in the morning, but this morning it was extra busy with people coming not just for breakfast, but to see the latest Republican presidential nominee.
Good morning. How are you?
New Jersey Governor Christie came into a busy Becky's Diner in Portland, one of his first stops after announcing he's running for president.
Always do, yeah. It's great up here. I've been up here before.
While some people came out just to see Christie, others say they simply stumbled upon him, like Richard Means visiting Portland from Texas.
He was very personable and very outgoing and everything. This is the first time, obviously, we've met him, but everything you see in TV is what you see is what you get.
Governor Paul LePage also showed up taking a break from the State House to officially endorse Christie for president.
That's leadership. That's taking the bull by the horns and moving forward. And that's why I today am endorsing Christie for the President of the United States, because I think he's the real deal.
I'm going to be who I am. And that's why Paul's with me, and that's why Paul's had the success he's had in Maine.
Christie will continue to campaign in New Hampshire through the end of the week, but he says this visit was not a one-time thing. He says he'll be back in Maine soon to work with supporters. In Portland, Lexi O'Connor, CBS 13 News.
On the UMaine campus, Ted Cruz kept hammering home his point that he's the candidate looking out for Republican values, not Donald Trump.
But if I'm elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We will pass a flat tax and abolish the IRS. We will stop amnesty and secure the borders. And the result is going to be small businesses exploding, millions of new jobs.
Mother of 4 and small business owner Crystal Gates likes Cruz's idea of cutting all the red tape.
Even like a florist nowadays needs a license to operate. I mean, do you need a license to do that?
Backstage beforehand, Cruz spoke to Maine Republicans who will caucus tomorrow.
If you want to beat Donald, the way to do it is coming together behind this campaign.
Now, CBS 13 News is on your side at 11.
Our top story, a huge turnout brings a big win for Bernie Sanders, but also some caucus confusion with some Maine Democrats waiting hours to cast their votes.
At one point, this line here outside Deering High School in Portland stretched more than half a mile long. In the end, Maine voters went with the underdog. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders continued his strong showing across northern New England. He was the clear winner in tonight's Maine Democratic caucus.
Yeah, the race was called about 3 hours ago at this point. Sanders beat Clinton by almost a 2-to-1 margin, in fact. Right now, with 97% of the votes counted, Sanders at 64%, Hillary Clinton at 36%. We're told more than 48,000 people voted in today's caucus, but the Maine Democratic Party hasn't officially released the vote totals for both candidates. Now, that big turnout kept some people waiting in line for hours. That likely wouldn't have been the case if it were an actual primary, not a caucus.
Yeah, and tonight some prominent Democrats say they'd actually like to see the primary come back to Maine. CBS 13's Jeff Peterson is at the Maine Democratic Party headquarters in Augusta, where party leaders are acknowledging some confusion today.
Guys, I'm located right here on Water Street in Augusta, right in front of the Democratic headquarters. You can look up right here. They're on the 3rd floor, and they're continuing to count ballots and votes. Now, how about this? They had a record amount of people vote, over 48,000. But with that record number, it was a blessing and a curse. Democratic officials in Portland finished counting ballots just after 7 p.m. It wrapped up an exciting but also frustrating day for many voters. Some folks we spoke with stood in line for over 3 hours. Portland Mayor Ethan Strimling called that unacceptable.
Just not enough good planning, not enough figuring out of what was the potential turnout we might have, and how do we make sure that we process people. This is simply an administrative issue.
The administrative issue, Strimling says, was that because there were so many voters, workers were overwhelmed, and around 100 people had to cast provisional ballots because they couldn't register to vote after the clerk had to leave. All of this has Senate President Justin Alfon ready to go back to the primary system.
Every 8 years when there's an open presidential, people come out. They want a chance to make a decision on the direction of this country. And so tomorrow I'll be introducing an after deadline bill to ensure that we have primaries, or at least have the discussion if we can have a primary again back in the state of Maine, so that we can ensure that everyone can vote and vote quickly.
We received several phone calls, messages on Facebook, and tweets about other issues around the state. But bottom line is, with a record amount of voters, Democratic leaders say they did the best they could with what they had.
We're certainly going to work with Portland as we move forward and really evaluate our caucuses all across the state to determine what's the best way of doing this going forward, and certainly are very anxious to hear the constructive feedback from every single town. I do want to say, though, that the volunteers who are running that caucus worked tirelessly.
We'll continue to update the numbers. Also, we'll continue in the weeks to come to let you know how that bill is doing in Augusta. In the meantime, Democratic leaders say they just got swamped today. In Augusta, I'm Jeff Peterson, CBS 13.
Most voters were happy to wait in line, though, for their chance to cast their vote for either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. Supporters of both Democratic candidates talked about what's at stake today and in November.
Our opinions matter. They matter now. Now that we can vote, we can make a difference, which is something we weren't able to do in years past.
You have a large number of people are turning out in unprecedented numbers because this is a tipping point transforming election.
There were big crowds just about everywhere. This video and pictures show all the people at caucus sites in Biddeford and Cumberland as well. Again, tens of thousands of people voted today across the state.
Well, let's talk about the results. Let's start with that. Bernie Sanders, he's the big winner here in Maine. It looks like a 2-to-1 margin.
Yes.
I'll ask it this way. Surprised, not surprised that he's the winner and by the margin?
I think it's not as much of a surprise that he won as when Cruz won on the Republican side. But nevertheless, I think the size of the outcome, the mandate in a caucus state and in Maine, neighboring, Vermont, New Hampshire, it wasn't out of the realm of the expected.
This is where all the votes will be added up later on tonight from the Republican caucuses throughout the state, and that includes the one way up in Holton, where the polls there are still open for another hour. Those results will have to be driven all the way down here, and so we do expect a late night, I am afraid. Now, here in Lewiston, 2 hours ago, ballots were counted at the Androscoggin County Caucus. Here, the two candidates who made campaign stops in Maine this week got the most votes. Of those, more ballots were cast for Ted Cruz, but Donald Trump was a close second here in Lewiston. Again, though, this is only one caucus. We spoke with a few people who actually got here too late to vote. They showed me a Maine GOP website which said polls closed at 7. Well, that's true in some locations like Holton, but here in Lewiston, polls closed at 4. The GOP website does accurately list the times when each caucus site would open and close, but because the caucus times varied by county, that's where some of this confusion came in.
I was out and about doing some errands, so I stopped in, and my wife wanted to come and get this over with, so unfortunately we're locked up. You would think they would have had their stuff a little bit better together than this.
It's pretty disappointing for me because I really wanted to have a chance to, have my vote. So
the rule was that if you were in line when the polls were supposed to close, that you could vote, but if you came in after the line completed, then unfortunately it was too late.